Welcome to you all on this lovely Tuesday. Welcome to you all from primary care. Hopefully we have colleagues from optometry, pharmacy and general practice as well. I'm Dr. Ashton. I'm a GP in Derby City, and
essentially we just wanted to welcome everyone from primary care. So that includes all 4 sectors, and a huge thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us. I know over the past couple of years our well-being individually has probably had some challenges. So today we have George who will be speaking on change and uncertainty and body and mind. So if I could hand over to George, he'll say a little bit about himself and we'll kick off with the session. Thank you.
You're seeing change and uncertainty, the effects on our bodies and mind. And that's my name, George Andruszkiewicz. That's quite a name to conjure with. And as you can see there, I'm an affiliate trainer and workplace mediator. I'm an affiliate trainer with CIC, who are the organisation at the bottom right hand of the slide. That used to stand for Counselling in Companies when they first formed many moons ago. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. We've got less than an hour now. There's time for Q&A at the end of the slide presentation. Now, hopefully we will stop the recording at that point. So it then allows us to be more, we keep the confidentiality within this group. Feel free to either ask me or put something in the chat function. You can be putting something in the chat function while I'm speaking. My background is I worked in human resources for a large company. It was one of these things called a FTSE 100 company. And later I was a director of a couple of small companies, and I've got 15 years experience working in the mental health and also the addictions field. I currently work as a freelance trainer and also as a workplace mediator. Now, my work as a therapist showed me that people deal with change and difficult circumstances in a variety of different ways. Some ways of coping are more effective than others. Some people make good choices, and for others, their choices are perhaps not so good, suboptimal, shall we say. Now, in just under 2 years, most of us have experienced a lot of change. Most of it has been unwelcome, and we've had to adjust. Some people have experienced change that's been positive, less commuting, for example. Some people were furloughed and then they found themselves back at work, that sort of thing. So there were some benefits to some people. Now, for others, it's been a time of anxiety, uncertainty, worry. Yeah, some people have lost loved ones. And have been unable to spend time with family and friends at significant periods, significant things like birthdays or Christmas, etc. So bear in mind that you may be feeling fine during this past pandemic 2-year period, but some of your colleagues may have struggled. They may have struggled a little or a lot. They may not have shared their troubles with you, or they may be putting a brave face on things, even though every day is difficult. Now, conversely, you may be putting a brave face on things, but secretly struggling, or you may be fine. Now, bear in mind, everyone has a different story, and we're all creating a different narrative and a different commentary to the things that are happening to us day by day, in fact, hour by hour. So how we view things, maybe from different perspectives. So we're looking at some of the effects of on us. Yeah, most of this you know already. It's just sometimes it's nice to have a reminder. So that's our first slide. I'll let you read that and then I'll comment on some elements of it. We see from that routines, they give us a sense of normality or normalcy, as it says there, and predictability. When these exist together, we often feel we're in control of our lives, or at least some elements of control. But in the absence of routine and predictability, it may lead to anxiety, panic, fear, all sorts of things, which creates its own cascade of thoughts and chemicals and all the other stuff that happens when we get into a state about it. So what can we do when we face change and uncertainty? There are some options there. We all have a default. And what's yours? And sometimes we find ourselves going from our default into another mode. And if we catch ourselves doing that, because often it's an unconscious process to begin with, but noticing one's own self-talk is useful, trying to get ourselves back to the green ticks rather than the red crosses. And now, as you all know, pressure is what happens to us from the outside, and stress is what we create with that pressure on the inside. How we deal with the stress, what we say to ourselves, what sort of things we set up within ourselves, and asking for help and so on. That's the stress element. I'll let you read that. So even pre-COVID, we had uncertainty and change going on, yeah, which added pressures to the everyday. But often these things helped as challenges. They helped us to produce a kind of can-do attitude, or we could dig deep and we can find parts within ourselves and we think, oh, I didn't know I was capable of that. But now I am. Now I can look forward to things in a different way when fresh challenges come along. But in the current situation, the cumulative effects of what we've been through are likely to be perhaps negative. Yeah, not for everyone, as I said, but for many, many people. So it's unwanted stress, and it comes with an emotional toll. And how do you know what tells you that you're stressed? A slide here about the pandemic and mood, with a question mark. We know that we need healthy rest. Now rest, obviously people think, well, sleep or having a nap or something like that, that's one form of rest. But there are so many other forms of rest, mental rest. When you do a task, you allocate an hour to something, depending on what that task is, it's going to take an emotional toll on you, some tasks more than others. So maybe you have to prepare for it beforehand and also give yourself some time after the event. So for example, if you're caring for an elderly relative and they're unwell, then that's going to take perhaps more of an emotional toll on you than if you were just going off and doing some housework or folding some clothes, or doing some DIY, whatever it might be. Yeah, that's a different, both take an hour, but both will have an effect on you that's different. So, and also, if you know yourself well, then you know you're either somewhere on an introvert scale or an extrovert scale, and that's we move along that, don't we? And some of us need others. We need to produce social situations to be to get energy from that. Others, we'd like to have time on our own in order to get energy from being on our own, and then we're able to go and do some socializing or do our work, whatever it is. So knowing yourself and what you need to have for rest. We're not all the same. I think it might work for other people, but it might not work for us. But with exhaustion comes frustration, and with frustration can lead to anxiety and depression, as it says here. So what is restful for you? And knowing what's the best elements of rest for you? Is it meditation? Is it going and being with others in a choir, whatever it might be? Yeah, that works for you, but maybe not for someone else. And then we have this next slide, anxiety in the future. I'll let you read that. And we're very good at imagining a negative future. Yeah, in a way, the fact that we are all here means that we are the product of people that can work things out, worst case scenarios. If the robbers come and steal all our crops again, what can we do to stop that happening? If the crops are not so good, how do we store and put aside things so that we can get through the winter? Yeah. However, that can then lead to all sorts of what if and catastrophic thinking if it's given free rein. So we have to keep it within sort of sort of sane set of circumstances, if you like. Yeah, but we can go off on one, and perhaps there was a bit of that going on when at the beginning of COVID. There was quite a lot of worst case scenarios being bandied around in the press. Some of them did actually happen, others didn't. Yeah. So, but our animal brain, as it says here, is alert to that. That threat that's there, and we can imagine ourselves. We can catastrophize. This will get so bad, I'm going to end up living under a bridge with my children, with cardboard under our bums. Yeah, that we can all go into that one. So it's one of those things that one's got to look at one's self-talk and to remember, bring yourself back to the present moment. If you find yourself doing that, what can I put on pause? Are there some things that I can control now? I can acknowledge that I'm having this thought, but I don't have to feed it. Oh, I notice I'm doing this. Can I get back to neutral in some way? Oh, it's that thought again. Oh, okay, all right. Well, I think I won't feed it. Okay. Simple view of the brain. Brain stem there. Back of the brain on the left-hand side. Prefrontal cortex in green. Amygdala in red, and hippocampus having its own colour. Is that mauve? You know this stuff better than I do. The amygdala processes emotions, I guess, including fear and anxiety. At least that's one element of what it does. Prefrontal cortex has a chat with the amygdala and says, look, I don't think that's actually going to happen, or we'll deal with it if it does happen. So it tries to introduce sense into the equation. And the hippocampus sitting right next to the amygdala, well, that's all our memories and so on. And they are the things in some ways that make us, and they're the things that get disturbed with sleep. If we don't get a good sleep, the hippocampus won't be doing so well in retaining information. And the prefrontal, when I get stressed, I get stupid. I know that. So my prefrontal cortex gets switched off for a bit, and the amygdala takes over and floods me with anxiety, and floods of anxiety, anxious chemicals. So it's there's things we can and can't do with this, and it's in our power to notice what's going on inside our own heads. And we each have a stress signature. I'll let you study this. Some of these may be familiar to you. A lot of people have mentioned sleep disturbance in these types of sessions. There's been a lot in the press about that, and all sorts of ways of coping with those elements. Some of us may have heart symptoms, or racing heart, palpitations, and so on. Some of us, it may come into our breath, and for some of us, it might be in our tummies. If you're having all of these, then wow, there's something to consider. The mind certainly is often racing when we're getting stressed, and we may become disorientated and lightheaded. Again, these are what your patients are coming in with all the time. Personally, when I was a young manager, I just been made up into a young manager many moons ago, and I was given a team to run, and all the systems. It was in a further education college at the time, and I was given all new systems to run, and my wisdom teeth broke through with the stress, and I couldn't eat properly, and the TMJ was affected as well, and I'd eat through a straw. And I was still getting up at 6 in the morning, going into work, doing a 12-hour day, working at weekends, all that sort of thing. And eventually, as the stress became less, the wisdom teeth retracted back into my gums, and everything cleared up, and I could sort of do things like social activities again. Whereas before, I think I was being warned, don't take too much on. Okay, so and it may be that for some of us, our symptomology or our signatures move around from one thing to another. As you know, short-term stress response here, fight or flight or freeze, which isn't represented there, but that's another thing that can happen. And the thing is that we make no distinction between real or perceived threats. Our brains process things as if they were real. Now, just, people get scared with horror movies. And there's the reason for that is that we don't, it's something unexpected and it makes us jump. So obviously social media and the media itself has had a big message of threat. And even though we may have kind of switched off listening to that, it's still there. It's part of the culture in a way. So it does occasionally have an effect on us. And it's almost like a background thing. And then we've got long-term stress. That's a different chemical. From we're moving from adrenaline to cortisol. We're looking at burnout, long-term effects of cortisol and other long-term stress chemicals that are just sitting around, sloshing around in our systems. So here we've got the chronic sleeping disorders and a feeling of exhaustion. I'm waking up as tired as when I went to bed. In fact, more so. If that's familiar to you. My mental capacities, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. In fact, I'm 10-20% down on what I should be on. Loss of memory and efficiency as well, which in turn affects self-esteem, and we start focusing on things that have gone wrong rather than thinking of putting them right, or how we could maybe be kind to ourselves and take some of the pressure off. We tend to put our foot even further down on the accelerator, and a way to try and deal with it. And we may be subject to panic or paranoid attacks, which perhaps will fuel things like an unwillingness to take rest, take time off. And then because there isn't enough time and we're triple checking, quadruple checking everything, it can, because we've got less time for other things, it can lead to risk taking. So perhaps you may be on your last reserves of energy. How do you know you're heading in this direction? It's a long-term thing. It doesn't get fixed with a week off. So it's good to seek professional help for something like this. But being a carer or working in the care profession, one is less inclined to take that viewpoint. I should be looking after others. Well, could you be compassionate to yourself? Allowing yourself to be looked after. And I'll let you read the slide here. Some of us have been alone or isolated during periods of this process of COVID. For some people, difficult relationships can be more damaging than being alone. People that are in difficult relationships where there's plenty of arguments and so on, that can add to the stress levels. And then we're using unhealthy coping strategies because they work in the short term, which they alleviate a sense of stress and anxiety. So it could be substances, it could be behaviors of various types, and they work, but you need more of the same to have the same effect. And then in turn, that cranks it up and cranks it up and cranks it up. So certainly a lot of people have said that their alcohol intake has taken off. And for some people, it's prescribed drugs and so on, or street drugs. And then we've also got the communication challenges that come with the change. The technology that we love and we hate at the same time. We're more and more wedded to being on screens, and taking time away from screens is good. Looking at nature, looking at green stuff, particularly outside, getting some, if not sunlight on your face, at least some light is good. And what about consultations and meetings? Maybe working from home works for some people and we want to keep some of that. How do you negotiate that? Particularly when the culture is saying, come back, come back, come back. Some of you have not had the opportunity to work from home. You've had to go in and work at the coalface, as it were. The thing about also from working from home is people can stack you up with one meeting after another, after another, after another, particularly if you're not running your own diary. And people have said over the months I've been doing this with companies and organizations that they do not get a break. It's one meeting to another meeting to another meeting to another. Some have said no meetings on Fridays as a way of trying to cope with that, or at least Friday afternoons. And some have said 45 minutes for meetings instead of an hour, because that gives you some time. And then, of course, teams have changed. My niece, who is in her mid-20s, she's had 2 new jobs during the COVID period. She's quite ambitious. She works as a project manager. And so she's joined teams and, you know, and then another team. So how do we come back together when there's a sense of things are being dispersed, disparate? And how do you create space to think and be flexible when you're fully on all the time? Can you factor that into your diary somehow? What way can you do that? And in heading towards burnout, I'll let you read this, but those are factors. I was speaking with a consultant psychiatrist the other day, and his teammate has gone down. Two consultant psychiatrists, and so he's the only guy left there at that level. And he's saying, "Gosh, you know, I'm not sure what we're going to do. How are we going to cope? It really is running up to the limits." And so, you know, his challenge is to look after himself so that he can get through this period. So he's having to renegotiate things. And again, negotiate skills are good. You know, try them out if you need to. Some things are non-negotiable, of course. But, you know, a new reality is dawning for that particular area, practice. Increased responsibility, people are saying, has contributed to burnout. And of course, there's been an unfortunate amount of negative publicity for GPs not doing face-to-face consultations. I spoke to a GP recently on the phone. It was fine. Yeah, it was fine. And some of you may have experienced aggressive behaviour in the public, which then leads to increased levels of stress. And I, as a therapist, I also worked with police officers. And some of them had experienced a lot, you know, aggression and violence in their jobs. Some of them were, you know, pretty jangly, let's put it that way. After that, so, you know, it's like, where do you go with that? Who can you talk to? And some people don't want to burden their family or their loved ones with these sort of feelings. You know, where can I go? So we're here today to discuss, you know, the EAP. You know? That's its purpose, asking for help. Yeah, particularly if you are getting aggressive behaviour from people. I'll let you read that slide. Perhaps some of these things are familiar. So the slide here is basically saying heading towards burnout, and it can be, you know, again, catch your thoughts, catch that self-talk and that commentary. If you're feeling irritable, cynical, critical of yourself and others, what do you expect of this place? Oh, that's typical of these patients that we have, that sort of thing. People are complicated. Yeah, you know, your training obviously tells you how people have, you know, they present in so many different ways. You know, that one minute they're lovable, the next minute, you know, they're in pain and they're really nasty to you. And that's just how it is, isn't it? And you know, how do you then cope with whatever's going on within you, because that person's dumping a lot of stuff onto you. You know, they're coming in and talking to you as if, you know, as if you're their servant or whatever it might be. You know, that you have to deal with them quickly, and often you do. But there are others, you know, you're trying to separate out with your triage. And how do you protect yourself during that process? So where do we start? So with that, you know, there's a litany of not good stuff. So where do we put things? What do we do currently, and what can we perhaps put in place? If there's one thing to take away from this, is what new thing may I do, or what will I continue to do, or what one thing will I stop, and see what I feel like as a result of that. So it's easy to avoid making any changes at all. And there are some questions there in the slide for you to ask about your role. Taking time. What can you do about it? Taking time. Lots and lots and lots of people are not taking leave for obvious reasons. There hasn't been somewhere to go to, or it's very expensive all of a sudden, or they don't want the hassle of, and the extra expense of going abroad or whatever, something they may normally do. And it's also something, I don't know, maybe we're saying we don't deserve it, but taking time out, one's being compassionate to oneself, and we have to rest. We know we have to rest to look after ourselves, our mental health, our physical health. And we come back refreshed, and people actually, your colleagues will feel that. I know that when I haven't had a break, when I was working in an office environment, someone came back from a nice break, I'd feel the benefit of that. They'd come in like a shining presence. It was fantastic. Wow. And then you think, oh, I must do that. I must do that myself. But if people aren't doing that, we're not meeting with each other that often. We're not experiencing that kind of rejuvenating effect that a break can have on others, and then we look forward to it within ourselves. Then there's something else going on, perhaps. It's really, really important to take a break, to go and look at something else, be with other people, away from the day-to-day. And it says here that 32% of employers have increased mental health support for staff during the pandemic. So if you are experiencing something, or you're worried, without breaking confidence, you can go to HR. You don't have to give the name of the person that you're concerned about. We can say, well, what can we, what can be offered? What should this person be looking at? See what's available. Or if not HR, an equivalent function within your organization, or within your area, or within the division, or whatever it might be that you're in. And it says here, managers create a cheat sheet. What would you do if someone came to you and said, look, I'm really struggling, I need some help, can you suggest something for me? So if you've got all that to hand, the cheat sheet, as it were, you can give them that to start off with. And in speaking with your peers, sometimes we don't ask opinions of others or help from others, because we're just told, look, that strong people don't do that. And what I found was, it was, again, working as a therapist, is that it's the strong people that knew how to ask for help. They are the ones that would ask other people and say, look, I'm experiencing these difficulties. And they're almost teaching, they're almost using it like a coaching session. So if you use the analogy of a sports person, the top sports people use their coaches to improve, to get better. So it might be their racing turn if they're a swimmer, or their backhand return, or whatever it might be. They would go to the sports psychiatrists, sorry, psychologists rather, and various coaches, and say, look, I'm trying to work on this. What can you do? Can you help me? So they're the ones that tend to do better. The ones that try and do it themselves, often are trying to going round and round in circles. So speaking with peers, trusted colleagues, getting the confidentiality in place within all that as well, it's important. And here's some questions for you. How has your resilience been challenged? As I said before, 1 hour allotted to a particularly emotionally draining process, you may need to prepare for that before and after, as opposed to just a routine task. Where are those points in your day or in your week, and what can you do? How do you debrief, and so on? I worked in a team where you could come at the end of the day. We always had a debrief. we all got together, and it was a 24-hour sort of detox facility. So we had several shifts. So we always had a day shift and a night shift handing over. And we would obviously talk about the patients, but also what the things that we wanted to leave at work rather than to take home with us. And what do you have? What could you put in place? And this is your employee assistance program or provider. They're called CIC. And their contact details are there. The phone is fine, you'll be given two options. Option one is usually, I think, something like counselling, and option two is anything else. And think of it as a service where you've got the combination of counsellors and also someone that would work in, you know, so a legal or that sort of service. So, for example, if you've got getting problems with landlords or neighbours or some sort of legal dispute, or you're saying, well, what could I do with if my child's being bullied at school? You know, I just want to unpack this. I've got 50 different things going in my head. Can I talk to someone about what options I might have? Or caring for someone. There may be something that these people might know about that you you and your colleagues may not have come across. So an email, you can obviously do that. You know, it's easier to do that kind of at work in some ways. And if you do call, I think they say if they can't take the call straight away, there's usually a 2-hour reply back within 2 hours. And it's 24 hours, and it is confidential, confidential, confidential. I can't emphasize that enough. They do not share this with your employer. They do not share your initials or your date of birth or any of that. Yeah. Your employer is paying for this, and it's one EAP of many. Every 3 years, if the service is good, they might get the contract again. But your employer is free to go to other EAPs as well. And within that, you're getting this confidential service 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And you may not need it, but maybe one or two of your colleagues might. So it's well worth having this as part of the cheat sheet, if you like. Now, there's an evaluation code and link here, which if you could perhaps use your smartphone, if you've got an app for that, or else I guess if you photograph the HTTPS address there,